Millions of men spend their lives confused, chasing love, validation, and happiness from women, only to end up heartbroken. They give everything, sacrifice their dreams, and shape themselves to fit someone else's ideal. And yet, despite their devotion, they're left wondering why love seems to slip through their fingers like sand. But 200 years ago, a philosopher named Arthur Schopenhauer exposed the brutal truth about love and female nature that most men still refuse to accept. By the end of this, you'll see exactly where you've been deceived and how to finally take back control. So pay attention, because what you're about to hear isn't just controversial. It's the missing key most men will never catch. Schopenhauer didn't see love as a sacred bond, a spiritual connection, or a fairy tale waiting for a happy ending. To him, love was nature's most cunning deception, an illusion crafted not for happiness, but for survival. When you fall in love, that rush, that obsession, that sense that this person completes you, it's not your soul finding its match, it's your biology manipulating your mind. Schopenhauer argued that love, at its core, is a primal strategy designed to ensure one thing: reproduction. Nature doesn't care about your happiness or your fulfillment. It cares about the continuation of the species. How many men fall deeply in love with women who don't truly value them? How many chase relationships that ultimately leave them drained and hollow? That's because love, as Schopenhauer saw it, is not about lasting connection. It's a powerful, temporary delusion that makes men forget themselves in pursuit of a partner who often doesn't reciprocate with the same intensity. According to him, the concept of romantic love as we know it today is a modern lie, a story we tell ourselves to justify irrational choices and emotional chaos. Real love, he argued, is just an elaborate trick of nature. It feels profound, even transcendent. But once the biological purpose is fulfilled, once desire fades, once novelty is lost, the illusion shatters, revealing the harsh reality underneath. Schopenhauer's insight is confrontational because it forces us to question one of our most cherished beliefs, that love completes us. But the reality he exposes is much darker. Love is nature's way of tricking us into doing its bidding. And the price we pay? Our freedom, our purpose, our sense of self. So why does this matter today? Because most men are still living under this illusion, thinking that if they just love harder, if they just give more, they'll finally be happy. But in truth, they're setting themselves up for failure, trapped in a cycle that Schopenhauer saw through centuries ago. If you've ever felt betrayed by love, it's not because you're unworthy, it's because you fell for the illusion. Understanding this is the first step to reclaiming your power, because once you see through the lie, you're no longer its victim. You start living on your terms, not chasing validation, not bending over backward for affection, but building a life that doesn't depend on the fleeting whims of romantic passion. Men usually think they're chasing love, a soulmate, a lifelong partner, someone who completes them. But in reality, they're walking straight into a biological trap set centuries ago. A trap so well crafted that even the most intelligent men often fall for it without question. Arthur Schopenhauer didn't sugarcoat this harsh reality. He saw love not as a poetic force that transcends time and space, but as just chemistry, dopamine, oxytocin, and a cocktail of hormones clouding your judgment. You're not choosing your partner logically or rationally. You're being led by instincts older than civilization itself. And here's the cruel twist. Once the biological purpose is achieved, once reproduction is either secured or rendered impossible, love often fades. You've seen it happen. The passion dies, the effort disappears. You wonder why you're stuck with someone who once seemed perfect, but now feels like a stranger. Schopenhauer didn't blame individuals for this cycle. He blamed nature itself. Love is not a rational decision. It's an evolutionary strategy. This is why so many men find themselves trapped in dysfunctional relationships, unable to let go despite knowing better. They're not chasing love. They're trapped in an illusion designed to keep them invested, even when it's clearly detrimental. So, what's the lesson here? It's simple. Stop romanticizing love. Stop seeing it as a divine intervention. Realize that your feelings, as powerful as they may seem, are often just nature pulling the strings. This doesn't mean you should avoid relationships altogether, but it does mean you should enter them with your eyes wide open, understanding that your instincts may betray you. When you stop chasing love like it's the ultimate purpose of life, you free yourself from its manipulative grasp. Schopenhauer's insight was clear. To live freely, you must see love for what it truly is, not a soul-deep connection, but a strategy for survival. If you can recognize this, you gain a kind of emotional independence most men never achieve. Most men are convinced that love is earned. They think that if they're loyal, generous, and devoted, they'll eventually be rewarded with a woman's love and commitment. But reality tells a different story. You've seen it. Good men who give everything and get nothing, while others, seemingly less deserving, effortlessly attract the women they desire. Schopenhauer understood that women's choices in partners are not driven by loyalty, dedication, or fairness. Instead, they are rooted in survival instincts that prioritize security, status, and genetic superiority. It's not about being a good man. It's about being the right man, the one who fits the criteria embedded in the female psyche long before modern notions of love ever existed. Women are biologically wired to choose partners based on their ability to provide security and stability. It's not personal, it's primal. A man who is confident, socially dominant, and financially capable signals to a woman's subconscious that he can protect and provide. These qualities are attractive not because they indicate moral goodness, but because they suggest survival. It doesn't matter if you're kind, supportive, or romantic. If you lack the qualities that signal strength and stability, you're simply not seen as desirable. Schopenhauer would argue that modern men have been deceived into believing that love is a reward for virtue, when in reality, it's often a byproduct of perceived dominance. The so-called nice guys, men who believe that consistent affection, unwavering support, and putting the woman first will eventually make her fall in love, are usually the ones left heartbroken, wondering why their efforts were not reciprocated. Schopenhauer would say they misunderstood the game entirely. Women are not inherently drawn to devotion itself. They are drawn to the qualities that devotion can sometimes obscure: confidence, authority, and the ability to stand firm even in the face of rejection. This doesn't mean that women are manipulative or consciously seeking to exploit men. It's deeper than that. It's biological programming, hardwired into the human psyche. The problem arises when men refuse to see this for what it is, and continue living under the illusion that goodness alone will make them desirable. It's no coincidence that women are often drawn to men who are successful, influential, or socially validated. Status is attractive because it indicates dominance within the social hierarchy. A man who others respect, who can hold his own in a room, who doesn't bend to social pressure, that's the kind of man who naturally garners interest. Nice guys often project a sense of passivity, a willingness to always agree, to always accommodate. This doesn't come across as kindness to most women. It signals weakness. And weakness, regardless of its intention, fails to spark desire. Schopenhauer would urge men to abandon the belief that loyalty and dedication are the keys to a woman's heart. They are not. A man's worth is not determined by how much he sacrifices, but by how much he commands respect, not through aggression or arrogance, but through an unshakable sense of self. Stop begging for validation. Stop assuming that being nice will eventually pay off. Understand that women, consciously or not, assess men based on their perceived ability to dominate their environment, not based on how much they can please. Instead of focusing on how to win love through servitude, focus on how to cultivate qualities that naturally draw respect and admiration. Financial independence, social influence, and mental fortitude are not just desirable, they are essential. By embodying these traits, you stop chasing validation and start attracting it. You don't need to be the richest, the strongest, or the most powerful, but you do need to be undeniably rooted in who you are. That's the real lesson from Schopenhauer. Don't confuse being good with being respected. Build yourself into a man of undeniable value and watch how the dynamics around you start to shift. Most men grow up believing that the way to a woman's heart is through unwavering dedication. They hear it from family, friends, movies, and society at large. Be nice, be respectful, be dependable, and eventually, love will come your way. But reality often delivers a brutal wake-up call. You might think you're doing everything right, being supportive, attentive, sacrificing your own needs to make her happy. But in the end, you find yourself overlooked, rejected, or worst of all, taken for granted. Arthur Schopenhauer saw this dynamic for what it truly is, a tragic misunderstanding of human nature. Men who devote themselves completely to earning a woman's love often find that their devotion doesn't lead to respect. It leads to dismissal. Why does this happen? Schopenhauer's insight is as provocative as it is unsettling. Women are not inherently drawn to devotion itself. They are drawn to power, confidence, and the ability to maintain a strong sense of self, regardless of external validation. The good guy falls into the trap of thinking that his willingness to sacrifice is a virtue. But what he fails to realize is that his behavior signals one fatal message: dependence. Women are not naturally attracted to men who project dependence, even if that dependence comes wrapped in loyalty and kindness. They might appreciate the attention initially, but they won't respect it. To them, it feels like weakness, not strength. When a man devotes himself entirely to pleasing a woman, he inadvertently sends a message that his value is contingent on her approval. This triggers a subconscious reaction. Instead of feeling secure, she feels the pressure of being his entire world. And that pressure doesn't feel like love, it feels like a burden. Schopenhauer said that this kind of devotion betrays the very essence of masculine strength. A man who makes his happiness entirely dependent on a woman's acceptance loses his sense of sovereignty. And when a man is no longer sovereign, he ceases to be attractive. It's a phenomenon most men despise. The so-called bad boys who treat women with indifference often seem to have no shortage of admirers. They don't chase, they don't bend, and they certainly don't make themselves overly available. It's not because these men are inherently better or more deserving, it's because they project a sense of self-sufficiency. They don't need constant reassurance. They don't place their value in someone else's hands. That unshakable sense of self creates intrigue, sparking a woman's desire to be part of his world rather than becoming his entire world. Schopenhauer says that most men completely misunderstand what devotion should look like. It's not about being at her beck and call. It's about pursuing your own purpose with relentless focus and letting your actions demonstrate your value without ever needing her validation. And this is where the so-called good guys go wrong. They think that proving loyalty and dedication will eventually break through. But in reality, the more they bend, the less they are respected. If you find yourself stuck in this pattern, the solution is not to become cold or indifferent. It's to develop your own sense of purpose and make it clear that you're not easily swayed. Start valuing your time, your energy, and your goals more than someone else's approval. A man who has his own path to walk doesn't get stuck chasing anyone. And paradoxically, when you stop chasing, you become more desirable. Schopenhauer's message is simple yet profound. Stop basing your self-worth on how much you can please someone else. Build a life so full, so driven, so rooted in purpose that people naturally gravitate toward you. Not because you begged for their attention, but because your presence demands respect. The good guy approach fails not because kindness is bad, but because desperation is unattractive. True power lies in mastering yourself first, not in sacrificing your identity, just to be seen as worthy. Arthur Schopenhauer understood that women don't consciously manipulate men, but they do test them, often without even realizing it. These tests aren't calculated schemes, they're instinctual behaviors rooted in survival. Women test men to ensure they can handle pressure, uncertainty, and emotional complexity. It's simple. Women are wired to seek out strength. Whether it's social, emotional, or financial, strength signals security. A man who can withstand emotional tension without crumbling is seen as reliable, someone who can protect and provide. Testing is not about being cruel or manipulative. It's about subconsciously assessing whether a man's confidence is genuine or just a facade. If you react too emotionally, constantly explain yourself, or rush to make peace, you fail the test. You're signaling that your emotional state depends on her approval, and that's a weakness. Nice guys often believe that constant reassurance and agreeing with her will prove their loyalty. But this behavior only proves that they lack a solid core. Women don't respect men who are too eager to please. because it shows that their self-worth is tied to external validation. The men who pass these tests aren't necessarily rude or dismissive, they're just unshaken. They don't need to prove themselves because they're comfortable with who they are. They might even laugh off a sarcastic jab or calmly assert their opinion without trying to smooth things over. Women respect men who maintain their composure under pressure. They instinctively test to see if your confidence is real or just an act. If you fail by overreacting, you're revealing that your strength is conditional. Schopenhauer would argue that the real battle here is not between you and her. It's between you and your own need for validation. Once you master the art of being unmoved, you become the kind of man who naturally commands respect, not by force, but by presence. Remember, it's not about being cold or unresponsive. It's about showing that your confidence doesn't waver just because someone challenges it. That's the essence of being a man who doesn't just survive tests, he masters them. Most men think conflict with women is a matter of logic, that if they just explain themselves well enough, present the facts, or apologize sincerely, everything will smooth over. But Schopenhauer understood that men and women don't fight on the same battlefield. While men use logic, women engage in emotional warfare, and most men are completely unprepared for it. Women don't necessarily aim to win arguments with reason. Instead, they create an emotional landscape that pulls you in, shakes your stability, and leaves you questioning yourself. It's not about being right or wrong. It's about seeing if you can maintain your ground when the emotional pressure rises. This dynamic isn't always a calculated manipulation. It's often instinctive. It's a way to test a man's emotional strength and resilience. Have you ever found yourself in an argument where, no matter how clearly you lay out your point, the issue just escalates? You become increasingly frustrated because logic doesn't seem to matter. That's because, in that moment, logic is irrelevant. What matters is your ability to stay composed and confident despite the emotional storm. Women instinctively sense when a man's confidence wavers, and that's when respect starts to slip away. Schopenhauer understood that reacting emotionally when challenged by a woman only confirms one thing: that your stability depends on her approval. And the moment you give her that power, you've already lost. Real power in these situations comes from refusing to play the game. It's not about winning the argument. It's about refusing to let the argument dictate your emotional state. When faced with emotional pressure, don't rush to explain yourself. Don't try to fix the problem immediately. Instead, remain calm, hold your ground, and let her emotional wave pass without being pulled under. You might think being agreeable will keep her happy, but it often has the opposite effect. Women respect men who don't bend under pressure, who maintain their frame even when emotions are running high. If you keep your calm, don't take the bait, and refuse to escalate the tension, you show that your core remains untouched. Schopenhauer's insight here is brutal but necessary. If you constantly react to emotional challenges, you're giving away your power. Stop trying to be right. Instead, demonstrate your strength by showing that your stability doesn't depend on her mood. In the end, emotional warfare isn't about proving your point. It's about proving that your emotional foundation is too solid to be shaken. When you master this, you stop being reactive and start being the one who sets the tone, not by force but by unwavering composure. That's how you win. Most men today are trapped in a paradox. They're told to be vulnerable, sensitive, open, and emotionally available, as if these traits are the new markers of a strong man. Society pushes this narrative hard, convincing men that if they just show more feelings, be more accommodating, and embrace their softer side, they will finally earn the respect and love they've been searching for. The truth? Despite the endless advice to be more emotionally transparent, women still gravitate towards men who embody strength, confidence, and dominance. Men who show vulnerability too readily often find themselves sidelined, overlooked, or worse, pitied. It's as if society has created a new set of rules that, when followed, only lead to failure and frustration. Arthur Schopenhauer would have seen this as nothing short of a cruel joke. While men are being conditioned to embrace their softness, women continue to be drawn to men who are unapologetically powerful. The paradox is that modern masculinity is being diluted in the name of progress, while the primal instincts of attraction remain unchanged. Men who follow the advice to be more emotionally open often find themselves ignored or used. Meanwhile, those who focus on building themselves, men who are assertive, financially independent, and physically capable, naturally attract attention and respect without even trying. The real problem is that most men lack a foundation, a core that remains unshaken regardless of external circumstances. Schopenhauer argues that true masculinity doesn't come from conforming to society's shifting expectations, but from building an unbreakable inner structure. And that structure rests on three fundamental pillars: economic sovereignty, philosophical depth, and physical mastery. Economic sovereignty means that your financial stability is not reliant on anyone else's favor. It's not about being wealthy. It's about having control over your resources, being able to sustain yourself without depending on others. A man who is economically sovereign doesn't need to chase validation, because his survival isn't at stake when relationships fail or social approval is withheld. Women instinctively respect men who don't need their support to thrive. Philosophical depth is the ability to think independently and critically. It's about having a clear sense of purpose, rooted not in what society dictates but in your own understanding of the world. Men who develop this depth don't just follow trends or opinions blindly, they live by principles, not social approval. This intellectual sovereignty makes them immune to manipulation because they know who they are and what they stand for. Physical mastery is the embodiment of discipline and control over one's own body. It's not just about physical strength or fitness, it's about the discipline to push through discomfort, to train your body as a reflection of your mental toughness. A man who masters his physical form naturally exudes confidence because he knows he can endure challenges, both physical and emotional. This presence alone demands respect. These three pillars are necessities. They create a man who doesn't need to conform to fleeting societal expectations. Instead of being vulnerable to every shift in cultural norms, he remains steadfast, grounded in his own value and purpose. The problem with the modern narrative is that it tells men to dismantle their natural instincts in the name of progress. But Schopenhauer would say that progress doesn't mean sacrificing strength. Real masculinity doesn't require bending to social pressure. It requires standing firm, building a life rooted in your own sovereignty, and refusing to apologize for being grounded in your purpose. The answer to the paradox isn't to reject vulnerability entirely, but to integrate it wisely. Vulnerability without strength is weakness, but vulnerability grounded in unshakable pillars becomes authenticity, the kind that doesn't seek approval but merely exists as a byproduct of being whole. When you build yourself around these three pillars, you stop worrying about fitting into society's constantly shifting definitions. You become the kind of man who doesn't just adapt to his environment, he shapes it. You become rare, valuable, and most importantly, unbreakable. That's what Schopenhauer would call true masculine sovereignty, a state where respect isn't demanded but naturally given. Here's the truth. Real freedom for a man doesn't come from chasing love or earning someone's approval. It comes from mastering yourself, building your own identity, living with purpose, and refusing to let anyone else dictate your worth. When you stop looking for validation outside yourself and start focusing on your own development, you don't just become stronger, you become undeniably authentic. Build your own path, stand firm in your values, and people will naturally gravitate towards you. That's what true masculine sovereignty is all about. Living so fully and unapologetically that respect isn't demanded, it's just given. When you understand this, you stop playing the game. You live on your own terms. And that's the kind of man who doesn't just survive, he thrives. If this message resonated with you, I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and tell me your take on Schopenhauer's philosophy and how it challenges modern masculinity. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more content like this. Your support helps keep these deep, thought-provoking discussions alive. And if you're ready to dive even deeper, click on the next video. Let's keep exploring these ideas and push the boundaries of conventional thinking. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.